Okay, I'm told that we'll just wait a few seconds while they... I'd like to welcome the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries or Energy Affairs? Energy Industries. Okay, this is the Parliament's Committee on Energy Affairs. I think it's the first time the Parliament has had a committee of this nature set up in this way. And the mandate of this committee is to examine all matters relating to the energy sector. The members of the committee, myself as chairman, Colin Imbert, and I would ask members on my right to introduce themselves.
Yeah. Senator Franklin Khan, Vice Chairman.
Morning, Senator Danny Solomon, member.
Edmund Dillon, member.
Mr. Small.
David Small, member.
Senator Paula Gopi-Schoon, member.
Ayana Webster-Roy, member.
And we have Ms. Samuel and Ms. Skerrett providing secretarial support. Could I ask now for the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Energy to introduce your team and yourself?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure to be part of the inaugural meeting of this committee. As you know, the energy sector is a pivotal part of the economy of Trinidad and Tobago, so it's really a pleasure for us to appear this morning to provide information, as requested by the committee, to yourselves and, of course, to the general public in terms of it being televised, etc. I'm Selwyn Ashley, the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Energy, and I'll ask the other members of my team to introduce themselves, starting at the left.
Morning, Chair. My name is Ivor Superville. I'm the Acting Senior Energy Analyst in Ministry of Energy in charge of the Commercial Evaluation Division.
Morning, Chair and other members. My name is Heidi Wong, Deputy Permanent Secretary at the Ministry.
Good morning, Chairman and members. I am Louise Poywing, Senior State Counsel at the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries.
Good morning, Chair and other members. Richard Jeremy, Chief Technical Officer at the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries.
And the gentleman at the back.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Frank Looking. I'm an advisor to the Ministry.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. I am Monty Bihari, Director of Minerals, Ministry of Energy.
Good morning, Chair. My name is Leroy Mears. I'm advisor to the Ministry.
Okay, thank you. Is everybody hearing everybody, by the way? Okay. All right. Let me just give you a brief overview. I did indicate the mandate is to examine all matters relating to the energy sector, but I can give you some greater details. First objective is to determine the Ministry of Energy's current and upcoming strategies and incentives to promote new production in the energy industry. Secondly, to examine current efforts being taken to improve the supply of natural gas. Thirdly, to investigate areas of prospective oil exploration in Trinidad and Tobago, and that would include gas exploration as well. Fourthly, to gain an appreciation of the status of drilling activity in Trinidad and Tobago, and also to assess current and forthcoming initiatives and incentives to tackle the development of small and marginal gas fields, and I would add to that deep water fields as well. Now, members have specific questions. I would let you know this will not be our only meeting. We're going to start today, but we will be asking the Ministry of Energy to come back because we have a very long shopping list, which I suspect would take at least 3 meetings, including this one. So that I'll open the floor now to questions from members. Senator Small, you want to go first?
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate that. Good morning, members of the representatives of the Ministry of Energy. thank you for taking the time out of your, what I know are very busy schedules to join us here this morning. Mr. Chair, with your permission, I want to run quickly to the ministry prepared. The committee submitted several questions and the ministry prepared several responses. And one of the first is I would like to be able to elicit a response. I want to rush to page 8 of the ministry's response. And it speaks to the initiatives regarding the availability of natural gas, supply of natural gas in the country. And I would like to be clear and to be guided by the ministry, because there's a newspaper report today in the Express by, I think it's Alim Khan, essentially saying that natural gas is at the lowest level in 10 years, and that it doesn't seem that the outlook looks positive. My understanding, Mr. Permanent Secretary, is that just as you've outlined here, that certainly by the middle or to the end of 2017, there's very likely to be more than enough gas supply, all of the existing customers and potentially new customers. I would like to be guided on whether or not my summation of that is correct or otherwise.
Yes, thank you for the question. And certainly the issue of the availability of natural gas has been an issue that we have been treating with at the ministry over the last couple of years. Just to give a little history, the shortage or non-alignment of supply and demand was something that crept into the landscape as far back as 2010. And what has happened is, because of mismatch of activity on the upstream end in terms of what was required to provide adequate gas for the needs of the downstream consumers, we have been in a situation where we've had to manage the supply and demand. Now, the initiatives that have been put in place, as you outlined with our submission, have been arrived at through collaboration with the upstream suppliers, and certainly we have had discussions with the downstreamers as well. There has been a lot of effort devoted towards scheduling of activities to ensure that periods of curtailment or apparent shortages will be minimized. But the situation is currently that there are activities on the way, as you indicated, that towards the latter part of this year and into next year, that is when those activities will manifest themselves in additional production, which then would be able to address the needs of the consumers downstream. In the interim, we continue to manage the situation in terms of scheduling, maintenance. So for instance, at this time, there's not a shortage because one of the plants are off for maintenance activities. And this scheduling and managing that situation is the mode we are in right now. But you're quite right, towards the latter part of this year and into next year, there is production expected from some of the initiatives and the operations that are currently in train by several of the upstream suppliers.
Mr. Lashley, Mr. Chair, if you permit me, in your response, you noted that the ministry conducted in the discussions with the upstream and the downstream. Am I to assume that also you conducted this discussion with the National Gas Company also in arriving at these numbers?
Yes, indeed. The National Gas Company is critical. And in fact, they play a very critical role, being the company that is the aggregator of gas, the transporter, the supplier, and of course the purchaser and seller upstream and downstream. And certainly the National Gas Company is a critical player in those discussions. In fact, on a daily basis, we get reports coming in from all the upstreamers and the natural gas company, National Gas Company, sorry, to ensure that we manage the situation in the best way possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have one additional question on the same track, and I will pass on to someone after. Mr. Permanent Secretary, thank you for your response. I want to make a statement. I want you to guide me on whether or not my statement is going in the right direction. Would it be fair to say then that the ministry, after consultations with the upstream, the downstream, and of course our key player in the sector, the National Gas Company, is of the view that, let's say by by the middle of 2017, the issues that are currently being faced by companies regarding curtailments, there's a high likelihood that those issues would have gone away and perhaps may even be in a surplus position. Is that an unfair or correct statement? Could you guide me, Mr. Permanent Secretary?
Well, I wouldn't want to be, they want to preempt ongoing discussions and to, let's say, forecast the results of current activities, because as you know, activities will be programmed to produce particular results. In fact, one of the issues that has contributed in part to the situation we are in now is a lack of success on a particular initiative by one of the companies, but of course one of several suppliers. So we're managing the situation. I am hopeful that in the time frame that you indicated, that in fact the situation will be much improved, and in fact you went further to say oversupply. I wouldn't be as bold as you, but certainly managing and balancing the supply demand situation is the objective.
Thank you very much, Mr. Professor.
I mean, could you not be a little bit more specific? Because I think it's public knowledge that the juniper fields are supposed to be come into market when? In 2017? Yes? And are there any other prospects? I'm just talking about those that are public knowledge and that you can give a little more detail on.
But certainly, the Juniper project does, in fact, provide or will provide a significant additional amount of gas into the system, along with other initiatives that are earmarked to also contribute to the supply picture. What I was careful to say, though, is that I mean, as an engineer by training initially, I'm always mindful that in the execution of projects, there can be delays in part because of unforeseen circumstances. But certainly, all indications are that the gas supply picture is going to be significantly better. It will improve. The upstream companies are committed to work, and they are conducting work right now, which in fact will contribute to improving the supply.
Mr. Khan?
Mr. Lashley, regards to the first question on what are the current strategies and incentives in place to promote new production in the energy sector? I want to deal with the taxation aspect of this. Bearing in mind the principle of taxing, depleting, or finite reserves in our country, which is mineral taxation. The governing principle of that is that in a wasting asset, the state must extract maximum economic rent because the resources are not renewable. So it is in that context, I see some very, very lenient measures that were implemented. What year was that implemented? 2013 or 2014? Or all these allowances and
what the minister is specifically referring to is early write-off
of exploration and development expenditure. 2014.
2014, Chair.
Yeah. So, but it didn't really attract new investment in the sector because 2014 the oil prices was still reasonably high.
Yeah. What would happen, once the incentives are in place, there will be a period in which they will take effect from. And normally one Juniper field, which is one of the projects that is earmarked to produce additional gas, this project will benefit from these incentives that have been put in 2014. The list that was provided in the response is a series of incentives that have been enacted from over 2011 to 2014. There are various incentives here that we have put in to simplify the tax regime and also to get a greater benefit for the country.
No, but from 2011 onwards, during the 2011 to 2014 period, oil prices average $80, close to 100. I want to know if these measures did in fact bear fruit as it reflects to increase activity, because these write-offs are very, very affable to the operating companies. I mean, you're writing off 100% of your capital cost in year one. And not even only on exploration drilling. I mean, it's pumped up to 140% for tax purposes for 8,000-foot land wells and 12,000-foot shallow marine wells. Heavy oil is the same thing. Capital allowances is just, so what I want to know, if you do not have a ramp-up of activities to justify that reduction, you're just picking the government's pocket.
Sorry.
What I would like to say, the activity, while we may not get the increased revenue immediately, what you will see is an increase in the activity. And one of the indicators are the number of rig days over the period of time, which has shown an increase. And there was a table, page 19. You'd recognize that there was a total increase in the number of rig days from 1628 in 2011 to 2010 in 2012 and 2092. So there was increase in activity, and most of it was spurred because of the changes in the tax regime. What we are mindful of is that with the increased activity, we are hoping to get increase in the production of oil and gas, and that will be hopefully down the line.
But you didn't get, even though you got some increase in activity, you didn't get increase in production, because production and oil produces most of its oil in the first year, because there's a 50% exponential decline for solution gas dry reservoirs. So what I'm seeing is that at a cursory analysis, these tax breaks that were given to the companies, it affected the Ministry of Finance figures, obviously, negatively, and operationally at the Ministry of the Energy and the production level, we didn't see the benefit. So could you respond to that?
Yeah, let me respond. Just and you're quite right, Minister Khan. The fact is there are several factors at play. In terms of the maturity of the assets in Trinidad and Tobago, and the attendant decline rate in terms of production, we're always in a cycle where, unless there is activity, in order just to maintain levels, let alone increase, you need to have a certain level of activity to support and to ensure that that production levels are maintained. So that is one of the things which we'll have to. I understand your question, and what we can do is interrogate the information to try to do a correlation, if we can, with respect to introduction of the incentive and incremental production, perhaps as opposed to the absolute production levels. But certainly, as DPS Wong was indicating, one of the indicators, and in fact, the increased level of drilling activity has in fact corresponded to a decrease in the decline rate.
The exploration expenditure previously was written off over a 5-year period.
Yeah.
And that was changed to a 1-year period.
1-year period.
Okay.
Correct.
What was the reason for that drastic change from 5 years to 1 year?
Minister, there were committees that were set up to review the fiscal regime, and at the point in time, the competitive nature of our sector was being considered. And when we reviewed the fiscal as compared to several other countries, it was found that we needed to improve our competitiveness. This was one of the areas we felt that we needed to increase the incentives to the upstream investor, so that we could mindful of the situation that we have with the depleting resources, that we needed to increase and boost activity as quickly as possible. So it was given as an incentive to the upstream to bring on board earlier and quicker work within the industry.
No, I fully understand that.
Under the expiration.
I understand that, but that's not what I'm looking at. You went from a situation where you could write off the exploration expenditure over 5 years to a situation where it can be written off over 1 year. So you went from 0 to 100 in one go. Is there any other country that does this, that you can write off 100% of exploration expenditure in the first year?
This type of arrangement is very common in mature provinces. And if my memory serves me right, the UK have a similar arrangement in respect to capital allowances.
Well, we'll need some more information on this, because what it has done, I'll tell you what has happened. Because the oil companies can now write off 100% of exploration expenditure, you have some of the bigger companies, they are writing off more than their expenditure, so that the tax coming to the government is zero. Did you realize that that would be the effect of this? That you would have a situation where profits would be low, so that when they write off 100% of the exploration expenditure in the first year, the effect of that was that they would pay no taxes to the government? Did you know that, or did you figure that out, or did you suspect that when you did this?
Minister, perhaps I could just set the scene. At the time these incentives were introduced, one of the principal concerns would have been ensuring that our reserve base, because annual audits would show that, in fact, based on our depletion rate, gas, and of course the declining oil rate, the indication is clear that there needed to be some sort of incentive for increased exploration.
Mr. P.S., I know that, we all know that, that there needed to be incentives. The question I am asking is why this incentive, where you go from a 5-year write-off to a 1-year write-off, and the effect of that now is that because of the size of the investment, they are paying no taxes. Did you anticipate that this would happen when you did this?
No, Minister, when we did the analysis, in fact, we recognized there would be reduced. There is a report, in fact, and it indicated where we show that there would have been reduced revenues. But the pricing environment in which the review was done was completely different from what pertains today. So the answer to that is no, that there was no recognition.
And now my next question, why not? Why didn't you anticipate that prices could collapse and have a sliding scale or a two-tiered regime where if prices remain at a certain level, you write off 100%, but if prices drop to where they are now, you might write off 50% and 50%. Why didn't you think of that?
Minister, I don't think the pricing environment that we have today, anyone anticipated that it would happen. And I think what we need to be mindful of that we need to be proactive as there are changes in the environment that we need to look at.
So you agree now we should revisit this?
It's probably that we... Yes.
Well, I'm getting no tax, so I'm certainly going to revisit it. But just before Minister Khan and Mr. Smallers, before you, before that, I just want you to answer this. You agree now that because the volatility of oil prices has manifested itself, the extreme volatility, that when you're doing things like this, you need to have some kind of escape clause to get out of where we are now, where they're writing off all the investment and no tax because the price of oil is so low. Do you agree?
Yes, I absolutely, Minister.
No problem. Mr. Senator Small, Mr. Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You asked a couple of my questions, but that's fine.
All right.
And I promise only 2 questions, so forgive me.
No problem.
But I'm going on the same road, Mr. Chairman, because you've asked what happened and why. I am asking a completely different question. What was the effect? So I'm going down the same road as the Honorable Chairman. What is the effect? So that we understand the effect on production, which I think is insignificant or none. What was the financial effect? In terms of, did it mean that these incentives that were afforded these companies essentially went straight to their bottom line? Is there something from the BIR that the ministry can work with to help the government understand what happened with what was the effect of these incentives on the bottom line of these companies, and if there was an impact, a negative impact towards the BIR and the other state source of revenues. That is where I would like to go. And perhaps that may not be something we could talk about in this section, but I believe it's something that might be useful for the committee or for your consideration,
I
Mr.
actually
Chairman.
have the information, but we could talk about that at the next session, but the result was zero. We went from $1 billion in revenue, US, from a particular company to zero. Okay, that's the effect
Permit
of
me one
this.
other thing, Mr. Chairman, and then I will not trouble the ministry staff anymore. I have a question around the rig days, and I take note of the comments, responses provided by the ministry team that the incentive yielded increases in rig days. When I look at page 19, I look at the rig days numbers. It's interesting. I see rig days have increased, but when I look at it, in 2015, the rig days, of the rig days, 65% of those rig days were done by Petrotrin, including lease operators and farm out. In 2014, it was 72%. The previous year was 63%. The previous year was 79%. So that if the effect of the incentives was only to incentivize Petrotrin, and the other, and it's a very small group of other companies who are doing any other work. So this is where I'm saying I am really concerned about if we want to champion or to explain the rationale for the incentives that it was intended to deliver rig days, I am not sure if this is the result that we were hoping to achieve. And if this is the result that actually came out, then it needs significant revisiting. Because this is not because Petrotrin has its own special challenges. These numbers do not impress me in any way.
Just to address the question or the concern actually raised by Senator Small. And again, I think in order to correlate the impact of an incentive, some analysis has to be done specifically. And in fact, that work is work that is ongoing, both in the context of within the ministry. And I just want to go back. These incentives were not unilaterally developed by the Ministry of Energy. The Ministry of Finance, the Board of Inland Revenue, certainly other state players, because of particularly the impact that these incentives, it was anticipated would have on the bottom line and on their taxes, etc. And certainly as well, collaboration with the industry, and of course, looking at what the external environment, the global environment that you are operating in. That has changed, and certainly I'm in full agreement. That is something that should be the subject of some substantial review, and of course, looking forward in terms of crafting some sort of fiscal system, incentives, or structure architecture that would work for us in this time.
Before I allow Senator Small to continue, Mr. Khan, you wanted to get in something?
Just to add some other aspects of this. I want to support Minister Imbut in the context of the exploration capital is so high. And just to offer to write off that in year one, to me, doesn't make sense, but it has happened already. We will look at it. If you go to B, development, workover and qualifying sidetracks. Now that you could easily justify 100% of that write-off in the year in which it was done, because the capital costs in these development and sidetracks and workovers are low. So it can assist the company in boosting their production and at the same time provide the incentivization. Because what is dangerous about this legislation is you go down to page 3, under 3B, losses can be carried forward indefinitely. So Mr. Imbute, finish yet, because if they pay no taxes for 2016, but they still have write-off, they could carry it forward to 2017 and 2018 and 2019, because an exploration program is extremely high capital. So apart from offering it to write-off in year 1 instead of year 5, if the write-off carries your sort of significant losses, you can write off just enough to pay zero taxes and carry forward the write-offs to subsequent years. So this thing really needs relooking at.
Before Mr. Small jumps in, I just want to get some clarification on a statement made about rig days. I think Ms. Wong had said if we look at rig days for 2011, we'll see 1,628. And then in 2015, 2,045. Correct? Total? Page 19. So I'm seeing that the total rig days 1628, 2011, 2045 in 2015. But the incentive here for exploration expenditure only kicked in 2014. So we really need to start looking from 2014 going up. Okay? And what I'm seeing is 1,587 rig days in 2014 and 2045 in 2015. Would you say that that increase from 2014 to 2015 is a direct result of this incentive? Could anybody on the ministry side say? In the back, in the front?
Actually, Chair, I would want to be cautious, as I indicated. What we would need to do is to do a thorough interrogation to determine and to see if we can correlate the timing of and the introduction of the incentive and the actual programs that will be instituted by the respective companies.
Right, because what I'm seeing is in 2013 it was 2,092. It was actually higher than it is in 2015. Now that may be that the price of oil was high in 2013, so that motivated the companies to explore. Then it started to drop in 2014, so it dropped off. Then the incentives kicks in, so it came back up. But I think we need to be very scientific, and we need to be data-driven in dealing with these issues. Yes, Senator Swan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I more seek your indulgence. The ministry presented data on page 16 regarding the footage drilled, and it categorizes it by land and marine and total. But there's a further categorization that I would like to request, with your permission, Mr. Chairman. I believe that for us to understand the differentiation between development drilling and exploration drilling, because we are aware, the committee is well aware that development drilling really speaks to maintenance of current production levels, and exploration drilling is really where you're looking to try to increase the resource base. And I ask that deliberately because I think that the ministry continues to say that one of the drivers is to try to find new resources and to understand where we can monetize and find new places where we can bring up additional oil and gas. From these numbers, the pure numbers in front of me, it looks good. Footage drill is increasing. But where is that footage drill increasing? If it's purely or mostly in development drilling, then the other aspect of the ministry's portfolio of trying to grow the resource base, perhaps there's a challenge there. And this is where perhaps the committee could be of assistance to the ministry. So this is a data request from me, not necessarily a question, but I think that for us to understand just the breakout, what is really happening with development as opposed to exploration drilling. I know it's tied to the bidding rounds, but I think it's also important for us to understand what has happened. The history is important for us to plan for the future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And that information can be supplied to the committee, certainly.
I'd like to ask a question. Sorry, any other members want to ask questions before I go in? Sure.
It's a little bit off of what we, different to what we were speaking of. I noticed something in the social media this week, actually, about a private consultation on tar sands. And I wanted to get the ministry's view of it, especially with regard to the modern thinking on the environmental side of it.
Well, certainly the resource, as a natural resource, tar sands is one of the resources that is available for consideration for exploitation in Trinidad and Tobago. But you're quite right. The exploitation of tar sands, the particular methods, the technologies that are applied, would have to be examined carefully in the context of the impact that exploitation of these resources can have on the environment, on stakeholders, on land use. And certainly that is something which is the subject actually right now of some examination in academia. The ministry is supporting research in terms of not just identification but characterization of a lot of the tar sands resource base, its spatial location, its quality, and in addition to that, the technologies that can be utilized to exploit these resources if and when we decide to do so. Mindful, of course, of the impact that certain technologies can have on the environment and the use of limited land space in Trinidad and Tobago.
So there's research.
Yes, there's ongoing research.
Sir Dillon?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I want to go back to the statement made by Minister Khan with respect to losses being carried forward indefinitely. And two questions. One, what is the rationale for these losses being carried forward? And two, what type of losses can be carried forward indefinitely?
Ms. Wong was part of the Fiscal Review Committee, so I'll ask her to answer that one.
When we indicated the losses carried forward, it's part of the Corporation Tax Act and the Petroleum Tax Act. Under, I can't recall this section, but it's part of the tax incentive that is given to companies under the E&P tax regime and under the basic tax law provisions for companies where they are afforded. Yes.
Yeah, that's in what kind of costs? Drilling, tangible, intangible?
It would be all cost that can be, yes.
Okay. I'd like you to go to page 3 of your document. In terms of capital allowances, I see you making a statement that qualifying exploration and development expenditure can be written off over 3 consecutive years, 50% in year 1, 30% in year 2, 20% in year 3, effective January 2014. But on page 2, you said 100% of exploration expenditure may be allowed in the first year. So is there some other type of exploration expenditure that you are referring to here?
Chair, this, the exploration expenditure in respect to 100% is, the company could choose to do that. The company has an option of either doing it that way, taking 100%, or writing it up over the 50, 30, 20. So they have to elect either to write off 100% or to write it off over 3 years, 50, 30, 20. So it's an election.
What company would do that? If you could write off the whole thing in year 1 and carry forward the loss, what company would do that?
Well, Chair, it depends on the planning of that particular tax planning company. They have to make a decision what's best
for them. So you are saying there's a dual regime in place where you can write off the 100% if you wish, or write it off over 3 years if you wish?
You have that option.
That is currently in place right now?
That is in place.
What was the thinking behind that?
Well, again, the incentive, more or less, based on what we spoke about before, is to stimulate the sector. We have to recognize that our sector now is very mature, very, very mature. And the issue is, how do you attract investment into the country?
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
And therefore, I can understand why, and I think everybody here understands why, you went to the 100%. But that argument does not hold if you're telling them they can also do it over 3 years. How would that incentivize anybody? If they can do it all in 1 year, how do you incentivize them by telling them you could also do it in 3 years if you want?
Let me. Minister, if you recall, there were a difference in the tax regime prior to 2014 and what was introduced in 2014.
Yes.
The capital allowances that would have been written off, there would have been an accumulation which would have been carried forward under the old regime. That exploration expenditure is the one that is referred to in B. So where before you would have had to write it off if in 5 years, you now had the option of that being included in this.
So this is for prior?
Previous.
Yeah. So there is a difference?
Yes, there is a difference.
Okay. All right. Second issue I want to address is on page 4, item 2, where you talk about a discount on SPT rates, supplementary petroleum tax rates, and you say there's a discount of 20%. So assuming that SPT, is it 35% is the highest rate of SPT now? 35%?
I believe it's 33%.
Okay, because you told us SPT rates were harmonized for land and deep water from 35 to 18. So you're saying it's 33?
33%.
Okay, fine, no problem. Well, it says for new field development, 33 to 25. It says marine, 42 to 33, land, 35 to 18. All right, but I'll take your word for it. That is 33. So the 20% discount would take that down to 27, somewhere around there?
Yeah.
Right. An argument has been presented to the Ministry of Finance by small operators that with the current price of oil, from the time oil goes from 49 to 51, the SPT immediately kicks in. And because these rates and this threshold was determined when oil was, say, $25. So you had $25 oil, and then if it went to 50, that was a windfall. So the SPT then kicked in to deal with a windfall. That this does no longer applies or is no longer relevant with respect to oil prices in the $40, $50 range, because as soon as they cross $50, you're hitting them with 33% SPT right away, which makes it unprofitable to produce oil at $51. What is your answer to that?
Just to go back, Minister, to my full agreement with you in terms of...
I posed a question to you, I didn't ask you to agree, but go ahead.
No, but certainly, I think it's apparent to all that there's a need to revisit the incentive package or the fiscal architecture in light of the change of environment. So certainly, what was previously structured as an incentive in the current environment, certainly it doesn't present any at all. Further to that, I think in terms of strategizing, given the outlook for oil prices over the the short to medium term, I think it's incumbent on the government to address this matter. And I think the way we have addressed it in the past is, through a tax review committee. And certainly, I would strongly recommend that is something that should be afforded a high priority.
Okay, but dealing with this specific issue of the fact that if our oil is 49, you're paying a certain level of taxes, and as soon as it hits 51, SPT coming at you, which may make it unprofitable to produce at 51. What's your answer to that?
Yeah, what I think the answer is, we need to ensure that any sort of structure we put in place, a step change always influences behavior sometimes in ways that we do not intend. So we need to probably look at ways where there are changes anticipated, there's some sort of, I would suggest, formula that takes you gradually into that particular realm. Certainly our objective is, as a windfall manifests itself, certainly our position, I'm sure it will be shared by the Ministry of Finance.
No, the point I'm making,
that needs to come.
When oil was 25,
yes,
and then there's a war in the Middle East or something happened, and it jumped at $50 in a month, that's a windfall. But if oil is averaging 49 and just kind of goes over to 51, 52, that's not a windfall. But SPT is a windfall tax. So I'm asking you if the ministry has looked at this at all.
Minister, yes, through the several tax committees that we have had over the years, the SPT regime has gone through several substantial changes. In 2010, we had a multi-tier system that ranged from about $15, $11 straight on to about $49, where there was subsequent increases as you increase every $10 or $5, there was a percentage increase. What we sought to do over the last 5 years was simplify the SPT regime. And every simplification that was made meant that there would have been less and substantial reduced revenues to the Ministry of Finance. So that had to be managed in a particular way. So the review came about, certain incentives, in fact, were put in place, but it is a constant review that is done annually with respect to the fiscal regime and its incentives that are offered. So in this environment, another review can be.
I hear you, but do you think annually is a sufficient period with this kind of volatile environment? Should you be reviewing taxes on an annual basis?
At one time, there was a policy directive to do it every 2 or 3 years, but I think it's something that needs to be done constantly as the environment is changing. Yes.
Okay, but do you buy the argument that the rate at which SPT kicks in, the price at which SPT kicks in should be looked at? Because what has been adjusted is the rate.
What has been
adjusted? You changed the
Yes.
rates, but you haven't changed the threshold. Do you buy that argument that you should look at the threshold of $50?
That's another. We have changed the threshold, in fact, because the earlier ones ended at $50, and we had changed the threshold up to about $200 with the expectation that you would have had another type of pricing environment. And as the environment changes, I think a review has to be done on the fiscal,
On the price?
On the price and on the structure itself as well.
Okay, all right. Well, I don't have any more questions on that today. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a data request and one short question. At the ministry's document at page 5, at the very bottom, it speaks to the work and analysis, and there's a statement that rolls over to page 6 where it says the current strategies and incentives compare favorably with those offered by new and emerging hydrocarbon producers. Through the chairman, I would like to ask the committee please be provided with a copy of the analysis and data to support this statement. I think that it's always good to understand because the statement is there and it says very clearly what the ministry's position is, but I think it would be informative for the members of this committee to understand, see what the ministry saw. Perhaps you may look at the same thing and see something very different. Mr. Chairman, I have one short question again, and it has to do, given the current situation where we are in terms of optimizing our resources. The ministry should be aware there's several smaller gas pools that are available. And then, of course, there's one big gas pool in the North Coast that, for some reason, haven't been able to figure out what to do with that big gas pool. It's under contract. But I think that in a situation where we've been experiencing gas curtailments for a couple of years because of a whole range of issues, we have actually gas that is available, is proven, is under contract, and for several reasons, they're not being produced. And the core reason, in my respectful view, is that the companies have not decided when they want to produce it or how to produce it. And I have a challenge with that, because that's our resource. I understand it's under contract, but I am not enamored of the position where a company can sit on resources and decide to produce it when it's convenient for them. I have a huge challenge with that, and I would like to understand from the ministry, is there any way that the ministry has looked at this and has said, we need to find a way to incentivize, take away, or whatever? I have a simple view. If you tell companies these resources you're sitting on, you're not doing it, and it is in the government's interest that we get those resources back out to people who may be interested, let them make a case for what they're going to do with it. Let them make that case. And I think this is something the ministry should consider, and I would like to get some feedback from the Permanent Secretary and any other member of this team on this thought process.
The only feedback I could give at this time, Senator Small, is that the matter is being actively looked at right now. And you're quite right. The resource base is the subject of several licenses and production sharing contracts, and there are contractual arrangements on the downstream end for gas supply. Certainly we need to be mindful of the measures we introduce in terms of what would be the best way to, you mentioned incentivize. It may not even be incentivizing it. It may be ensuring that there's alignment of opportunities that make commercial sense. Yes? So certainly all of these things are being looked at, but I wouldn't want to preempt any sort of plan that would come out of a review and a strategy adopted to address the issue that you have just identified. Sorry.
Just
No.
sorry.
We have a new entrant.
That's all. Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to understand for the listening public as well, is that you're saying that we have some natural gas supply that's going to increase by the middle of 2017. What did we do right in order to create this supply coming in 2017? I understand that it takes some time before you make decisions that you're going to reap the benefits as a result of the investments. Could you articulate for us what was done to create this supply that we expect in 2017, and when was it done?
Yeah. I mentioned it earlier, some of the incentives, and I think DPS Wong pointed out one of those in terms of the Juniper gas project that is earmarked to bring supply on in a particular time frame. That particular project, certainly, like any other operator, would of course have the benefit of accessing the incentives that have been provided over the time frame 2014-2017. So certainly that's one example. But I think at the end of the day, the increase in supply is guided in part by the contractual commitments as well, in terms of commitments to supply to existing contracts, and certainly going further under that, any sort of opportunities for even supplying for, wedges of gas where there may be some operators who, because of their lack of success, it provides an opportunity for another supplier to step in and supply. So those are some of the things which would have created this opportunity and the increase in gas supply.
Through the chair, I'm also just wondering, and I know a lot of the people in a lot of the citizens of our country are concerned about the forecast for jobs in the energy sector. I don't know if you can help us and enlighten us in that regard. Thanks.
What I would ask is, that's a question we're going to put you in writing, because after this session we're going to send you more questions, and that will be one of them. I don't think it would be fair for them to speak off the cuff unless you want to. Yes?
I was just about to note to share the interest in terms of the impact. Certainly, a lot of it is a manifestation of the current economic environment, but certainly that's information we need to compile, and then we can supply.
Writing you based on that question.
Sure.
I just want to give you one final question, because we're going to wrap up at 12, but I think we'll have you for at least 3 sessions. And what will happen after every meeting like this, we'll send you written questions for further answers. In your document, you spoke on page 5, I believe. Yes. Page 5, you spoke about a consultation. Wasn't this supposed to take place in December or January?
Yes, Chair, you're correct. Initially, the plan was to engage in sort of consultations with key stakeholders in order to inform the development of strategy going forward. Those plans have, in fact, moved into this year, but certainly the intention is still there to have consultations.
Yes. If you don't set a definite time frame for these consultations, they will never happen, So does the ministry have a definite date or month for this consultation?
Yeah, the consultations are being planned for this quarter.
Before the end of March, then?
Before the end of March and into April. What has happened is, in terms of defining the structure of it, it was the subject of discussion within the government in terms of how do we structure the consultations, to have the maximum effect in terms of getting key information to feed into the policy. So certainly that's what we're looking at.
It is not something it's not something that anybody should drag their feet on. It's very, very important. And I personally remember at the energy conference, one of the speakers, I think it was the president of BHP, had made the point that this government had promised consultation and had urged us to get on with it. So that we will be writing you. We want an answer as to when this consultation will take place. Okay?
Noted, and we will respond. Chair.
And I want to wrap up now, but if anybody else wants to ask any questions, okay? But thank you very much. And as I said, we'll be seeing you again. I can assure you the questions will be harder on the next occasion. Okay, we are
here to respond.
We ease you up for the first, we soften you up for the first meeting. Okay, but what I would say though is that it is not appropriate to say you think, maybe, might. Be prepared for all sorts of questions. I mean, you're not psychic, but be prepared to come with information to answer questions specifically if you can, because that's what we want from you. Okay?
Certainly, Chair, and we are here to support the committee.
Thank you very much. Okay, right.
Thank you.
This has been a presentation of the Parliament Channel and Parliament Radio 105.5 FM.